There we go. Okay, I was playing with scenes. How's everybody doing today? To this Thursday, May 20th. Thank you very much for joining us today. And yeah, so apologies for the last. We had a little complication in getting the last session set up, and it never happened. I apologize for anyone who had signed up. We were looking to do a panel with the speakers from Adobe Summit that talked on Firefly, and scheduling just was a challenge. So maybe we'll do that in the future when schedules will will work out for everybody. But until then, today we've got a great topic: application security. So we do have a video out on YouTube that Sarah put together and produced. And she's here with us today, and we're going to talk all about application security, security for Firefly. If this is a topic that you've always wanted to know more about, this is a great time to ask questions and to hear about what we do for security. So let me bring in Sarah, and we'll get this started. Hey, Sarah.
Hi there.
How's it going?
Pretty
Okay.
good for a Thursday morning. So far, so good.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I've got your name on there, but it's like kind of covering you, so I'm going to take that off, and people know who I am.
I
So
guess I'm
I'm
not
gonna.
tall enough.
No,
There we go.
it's all good. It's just your camera placement. It's not a problem. Anyways, so how are you doing today? Things are good?
So far, so good.
Okay. Excellent.
So I'm here to talk about security. Fun stuff.
Yeah. So tell us, I mean, people probably know you from, you've done a number of these as well, but just tell us a little bit about who you are and why it is you're talking about security.
Yeah. I mean, for those of you who have been using Firefly for a while, hello again. It's me. My name is Sarah. I'm based in the Bay Area. I work as a product manager on Project Firefly. And yes, I've joined Ron's show in the past to talk about different aspects of Firefly. And yes, today we have the fun topic of security.
Right on. So yeah, this is great. So let's just jump into it, and you've got a presentation that we'll go through. And again, if anybody has
Yep.
any questions, just throw them up on YouTube as a comment, and we will address those. We've got Merrill from the Firefly team as well, engineering manager, who's joined us, and he'll be available to answer questions also. So let's jump into the demo, or the presentation, not demo.
Yep.
Okay. So
So what I'm going to do, basically, I have a short slide prepared. I'm just going to walk you guys through some of these content. And then at any time, if you have any questions, put them to the comments. Hopefully we can make this kind of conversational, and we can do deeper dive into areas that you are interested in. All right. So I think we're mainly going to talk about three aspects. Uh, are my slides going through? Can you guys see the agenda?
they are not. So it doesn't look like they're progressing. Why don't you?
Let me reshare and
Yeah,
see if that
exactly.
helps.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Well, this is looking better. So go ahead, and
Perfect.
we do see your agenda.
Okay, fantastic. So we're gonna see a little bit about talk a little bit about application security. So like, how do you know your application is secure? What are some of this stuff that we have on platform level, on like data transportation level that ensures basically like all the basis of your application being secure, and then how you authenticate and authorize your application so that um, calls to different APIs as well as user access are all secure. And then let's dive straight in. We're going to start with application security. So first of all, the underlying platform that we have for all of your actions, so all your backend services are running on Adobe I/O runtime. Um, the runtime platform itself is all very secure, both in isolation in terms of your code execution, in terms of like where your code is running. All your actions are actually containerized. So individual actions, even within your application, are executed in separate containers to ensure that they're not interfering with each other, and they will never be crossing over with other application executions. Other than that, obviously all the calls within runtime are all encrypted to ensure that anything in and out is all under HTTP as protocols. And then from there, oh, I think I'm on a slight delay with the slides. My apologies if it's going a little slower. And then from runtime, you can actually use your actions to make calls to different sets of APIs. This includes both Adobe APIs as well as third-party APIs. And for those, you will essentially, we'll be talking about this in a little bit more detail later with how you can authenticate and authorize these API calls, both for the Adobe ones and the third-party ones. Ron, I think I'm hearing a little bit of typing.
Sorry, that was me. I'll stop now. I'll mute.
Yep. Thank you. So those we'll dive into a little bit more detail in this part later, but essentially there are some out-of-the-box things that we're doing to help you ensure secure communication with these APIs, but it's also like equally on your part. It depends on what API you're calling. And last but not least, for anyone who might be using our file and data storage, we actually have this service called the token vending machine that essentially is used to grant temporary access and temporary tokens between an application to file and data storage. And each file and data storage for individual applications are all containerized based on your namespace. So let's say that I'm a developer and I have an application. All the file and data for my application that lives in namespace A is all separate from anything I'm building in namespace B. So even if I'm deploying the application into both places, their file and data are all kept completely separate. On top of that, like I mentioned, the token vending machine grants essentially temporary access. So you're using your application credentials for this namespace to exchange for a temporary token that only your application can use and only in runtime that can talk to these file and data. This ensures that no other application or services will get access to these without your permission. Okay, and then after we kind of talk about what all the underlying platforms and built-in security, let's talk a little bit about if you're building a single page application, how will a user get authenticated and authorized? So for those of you who have built application or have tried some out, you'll be able to see, you'll be accessing these applications from Experience Cloud. So when you open Experience Cloud, you're logged in. You'll only be able to see these things inside an organization when you're logged in. So when you're logged in, if you're like me, who's in like 2,000 organizations, then you will first choose the organization that you are using and that you are active in as a first step. And then once you're in the organization that you want, then you can actually see what application that you have access to. All the applications are secured for an organization, so that no application, if you deploy this for org A, it cannot be used by users in org B. We basically use, I'll show you a little diagram in a little bit, but basically we use your user access token to ensure that you're accessing this from the right organization with the right credentials. So from here, this screen will show you all the applications that you have access to. And first of all, you'll be able to see for the application that you have access to, you only see applications that you have permission to access all the product that it access. Let me go back a screen. There we go. For instance, let's say this application, Campaign Tracking Manager. It's using both analytics, campaign, and experience platform. It's a little, the other products are hidden, but it's actually using multiple products in that case. And I, as a user, will need to have proper access to all of the product that it is using for me to be able to get access to this application. This ensures that, like, for instance, every product have different access and content that's permittable to be used by individual users. This ensures that I will only be able to use this application if I already have access to all the content and data that it will potentially be accessing. So similarly, even for these other applications with single product enabled, that means I would need access to those products to be able to access this Firefly application. And this screen is more of, I guess, a little bit more of an in-depth on how you will actually be able to grant access to applications. So you will add yourself to different products. You will add yourself to the different products, and all of this is done through Admin Console. So it's a very familiar and existing process for granting and retracting access for individual users. Now, Adobe uses what's called the Identity Management Services, the IMS. If you've ever heard this term, this is the underlying kind of identity managed systems for all Adobe users. As you're logged in as an individual user, essentially the Experience Cloud makes a call to IMS to retrieve and to generate a user access token for you. And then IMS essentially knows what organizations you're a part of, what products you have access to within all of those organizations, and particularly like even more granular access level, like I believe in products like Target, you have different roles, right? Being a approver is different than an editor. So all of those information is essentially accessible through this user access token that's granted. And after you're logged in, that token is actually passed on to the underlying Firefly application in runtime, so that it's not only secure on the Experience Cloud level to ensure that only user with access can see your application. It's also ensure on the application level that if you do not have a valid user access token for this application, you will not be able to use the application. So now that we've talked a little bit about how would like a user authenticate and authorize, let's dive a little deeper into within an application, when your application needs to talk to Adobe APIs or external APIs, how does that whole thing work? So let's first kind of take a look at, we'll be talking about two types of applications here, right? Both headless applications and single page applications. So single page applications are the ones that you will deploy into Experience Cloud and be able to access in the mechanism that we just discussed earlier. And then you have this whole other category of like headless applications. They might be a workflow that's running. They might be, a recurring task. They might be a connector between different systems. They don't really have a UI to them, component to them, and they're invoked by systems or on their own. So in the case of a single page application, including the single page applications, they all share the same backend mechanism where you essentially have your microservices and action running on runtime. The difference is just whether or not you have a front-end component to it. Now, from runtime, you will never directly, from runtime, you will be able to make calls to both Adobe APIs as well as third-party APIs from your actions. And let's kind of walk through how it works, starting from the single page application example. So for a single page application, like I mentioned earlier, as you logged into Experience Cloud, experiencecloud.adobe.com, you will, behind the scenes, all your login credentials used to exchange for a user access token with Adobe IMS. And then that token is actually used when Experience Cloud is saying, okay, show me the Firefly application this person has access to, and bringing up the application to be used in Experience Cloud. So in that whole process, all the exchange and communication is using your user access token to say does this user have access to the right stuff? Does this user have access to this application, these APIs, these products? And then from runtime, the recommended approach is actually you continue to use the access token that is passed into you to make calls to Adobe APIs. Because as the right user, for most of the, I believe we might have exception on like 1 or 2 APIs, but for most APIs, they actually have the right, that your user access token will be able to be used to call these APIs, because obviously you have access to these content and data, and the valid access token can be used to call these Adobe APIs when used in conjunction with your API key and client ID for the APIs. So if you're also passing in the user access token to make these API calls, this ensures that instead of generating a new token, this ensures that all that communication is secure and ensures that the user will have the access to what they should have. But the case is slightly different when it comes to like third-party APIs, because you would essentially need to generate this token within your application so that it can make calls to these third-party APIs. And what you will end up doing on runtime is essentially you can pass these in as parameters. So you can set them as default parameters for your actions or use the state library to store some of them. We recommend the approach to store these as default parameters for your actions. Those are all encrypted so that it's secure on that level. And you can access these only within your actions. So you can say, I've saved my API keys as a default parameter. I would like to use it to generate a token to call third-party APIs. Now, it's pretty similar for headless applications with one exception. So instead of Experience Cloud calling your application, we will actually have either a client system calling it, or the application runs on a scheduler and is invoked periodically. So let's talk about the situation where a client system makes calls to your application. What we would recommend is for your client system to use an integration or a project integration that's set up in console to generate a token. This is through the whole JWT mechanism where you would first generate a JWT, you would sign it, and then use it to exchange for a valid access token back. And then your client system should then use that access token to make calls to your application. In the situation, and then that access token, similar to how you would pass on the user token, you would, in this case, use that same access token to make calls to Adobe API. So your application is expecting a valid token to be passed in so that it can be used to call Adobe APIs. Of course, for third-party APIs, same mechanism as before, you would generate those in your application and make calls to third-party APIs. In the case where, let's say you don't have a client system calling your application, but rather your application needs to generate the token itself, you would do the same thing as what you would do for third-party APIs. So storing the credentials you would need as part of your default parameters inside your application, and then use those to generate valid access token for the Adobe public APIs. You can always use the state library and our default mechanism to essentially persist some of these values so that you're not persist the tokens so that you're not regenerating them every single time you have to make a call. The last piece I wanted to speak on is what we call a default validator. We recommend that this is enabled for all Firefly applications. So if you're building a Firefly application, hopefully you're familiar with this view. It's essentially defining your actions, right? So within your manifest, you have the actions. You have generic action. In this case, with generic action, we have stock search, so 2 separate actions. Under annotations, you can see this option that says require Adobe Auth true. we recommend that you always enable set this to true, require Adobe Auth, because here's what it does. When that value is set to true, essentially when any call is hitting your application, you have to first go through what we call the validator. What the validator does is essentially takes the access token and then does an additional check to ensure the access token that is passed in is valid to be used for this application. So it checks against, like, does this user have access to this organization? Does this user have access to, should the users have access to this specific application before any execution happens actually for your application? And this is true both in the single page application scenario, so experience cloud making calls, as well as headless application. So any call that is going into your application will have to basically pass the check of the validator first to ensure there is a valid access token coming in.
Hey, Sarah,
Yes?
why would we even have the option if this is kind of what we recommend? I mean, I guess in what circumstance would you ever want this to be false? Or would you ever, yeah.
So yes, basically the only time, and I guess it's not so secure, the only time you would turn this off is first in development mode. Maybe you're like, I just want to make sure that my actions are working as expected, and you don't want to have to like pass in an access token every time.
Right.
And the second scenario is sometimes when the client system you're using cannot generate the token and pass it in. I would say that's another popular scenario that we've seen in the past. So sometimes there's limitation on the client system or on the type of communication it can send out. And then I think we've seen this with, like, for instance, Campaign Standard. So in Campaign Standard, one type of Firefly application is essentially a headless application that you can put into campaign workflows. And then in Campaign Standard, what the payload that you can send out is a little bit more limited. So they won't be able to actually pass in an access token. And in that case, your validator would have to be turned off, because otherwise campaign wouldn't be able to call your application at all. I would say that's like one of the scenarios where you would actually have to turn the option off.
Hey, Sarah, Miriel speaking here. Hi everyone. Can you hear me? Just to be sure. I can see myself now. So I think you can hear me too. Just wanted to chime in here to provide a bit more feedback about the use cases. One typical use case could be also that you're building a runtime action that doesn't interact with any underlying Adobe API and is mostly computing something. It's a very narrow use case, but for this one, I don't think it would necessarily be useful to validate the token against our own system or our own authorization system. And another scenario is in case you're building an action that is used for a B2C use case or a B2B use case, such as server-side rendering or anything that would be used by a website or an SPA that doesn't deploy into the shell. And you still use a headless application for that, because right now you cannot build a B2C SPA with Firefly. In that sense, you would not need to pass a token to be validated against IMS, because the end users which are accessing this B2C website or SPA are not Adobe Enterprise users. They are like your customers. Thank you.
Great cause. That was my engineering counterpart, Meryl. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I think this is the end of my slides on security, basically. I do want to leave you guys with this screen that basically have some links that you can use to try out Project Firefly, documentations, sign up for a preview, as well as a little sneak peek to our next session, which, Ron, do you want to speak to about your sneak?
Yeah, so absolutely. Next session is on June 3rd, and you can head over to the events. Go to the Firefly homepage and then click events up at the top, and the sign up link is there. And we will be sharing behind the scenes, in depth, the exciting development that we showed at Adobe Summit Sneaks, where you can build a front end UI without writing code. So it's pretty extraordinary, and it should be an awesome session. So join us for that on June 3rd. So we do have a question in chat. Can a Firefly SPA be deployed, accessed publicly outside of Experience Cloud? Sarah, Meryl, you guys want to? I mean, I could answer that, but let you guys answer that.
I would say technically yes. Essentially, after your application, all your single page applications are deployed. You can access it directly through the CDN. And it's not recommended because obviously, like when everyone is accessing the CDN, accessing your application directly through the CDN, then you don't have any validation in terms of user access, in terms of like validation, who should be able to do this, and you're more susceptible to attacks. So I would say technically possible, highly not recommended.
Yeah, and not supported, right? So we're not saying to do this, but there's technically no constraints.
Yes.
Excellent. Good caveat there. Yeah. Thanks, Christopher, for the question. That was great. Yeah. Any other questions on security? Any other things that are on anyone's mind? And I will, since Christopher, you did ask the question about an SPA being deployed publicly. I don't know if anyone caught Mihai, our product manager's blog post on the future of Firefly. But he talked about our, directionally where we're headed with making Firefly available for B2C and B2B use cases. And we will talk about that in the coming months. We'll have a whole office hours session dedicated to that. So that stay tuned for that later.
Absolutely. And I feel like, given we're kind of talking about some of the summit activities here, this feels like the perfect opportunity to shamelessly plug. If you have not seen
Yes.
the summit sessions yet,
Exactly.
they're all live. They're accessible through the summit website. You can watch the recorded sessions right on there. There's actually a bunch of Firefly related sessions. I think like Adobe I/O might be the better term to search, because we were slightly worried that our code name would get changed. If you look up Adobe I/O on the summit sessions, a lot of the application built on Firefly was surfaced. We had use cases with like platform, with AEM. There's a number of customer use cases that were presented during these summit sessions. Highly recommend. And you should always check out Raw and Sneak, perhaps before you join the next session.
Yes, exactly. As an intermission, you could always check out the live wired Sneak.
Exactly.
So that was a great plug, Sarah. And I am remiss for not having a page. I should have prepared a page with all the sessions. But definitely this year was awesome because we actually had a developer track, right? I mean, we've never had a developer track with Adobe Summit before, so it was a great to kind of consolidate all those sessions, and they're easily findable going to the Adobe Summit homepage. So yeah, definitely. Yep. Mihai had a great session. Poolkit had a fantastic session. We did in the previous office hours back in March, where he came and showed his app, and we did a case study, kind of a deep dive into his ODE app. He basically did a session around that and kind of went a little more in depth. And so definitely check out those sessions and all the others from Firefly topic. I gotta make sure I'm in the center. There we go. Okay. since there's
Me too.
three
I
of
kept
us.
like adjusting my head because this is the
Yeah,
hour where the light
right.
hits my face.
Exactly. Yes. We don't want you blinded because what happened? Yeah, I was on a live stream and I just couldn't move. So I'm blind now. It's okay. Yeah. So security. Anything else? Anybody? We don't have any other questions, but we've got a ton of time. We don't have to use certainly the next 20 odd minutes, but anything else in terms of security that you've seen questions from customers or partners or anything that has come up that's like, yeah, this is something that people should be keep in mind?
Yeah. I guess like one of the important things to call out is what we've shown today are basically a lot of our the built-in locks, right? All the
Right.
built-in locks to make sure that people like it's like making sure your car doors are locked before you start driving. But role safety, right? How your application operates, how you're actually dealing and exchanging these tokens, all of those, like just like any other compute platform, is on the responsibility of the developers. Like you have to do this correctly. Like we can only do so much. We make sure the doors are locked before you start driving so that you don't come off flying and the safety belts are on. But if you're swerving, if you are tailing someone too closely, those are all things that we cannot prevent.
Right.
So there's a lot of,
So
when it comes to like application security and user access, like definitely, a lot of responsibility, I think, still falls on the shoulder of the developer.
That's great.
absolutely.
Oh,
Just a
go
small
ahead.
hint in that sense, when you use the CLI to bootstrap your app, especially for the runtime actions, please do not have this developer reflex to just delete everything, Control A and delete, and then start writing your code. We've been putting a lot of things in the generators themselves, like boilerplate code, and this also involves checks for the tokens and things like that you want to have a look at before you delete the code and write it wrong.
Yeah, that's a great call out, Meryl. So yeah, definitely take the boilerplate code, the pre-baked code that we provide for you when you create a project,
Yep,
and build from there, so that yeah,
absolutely.
it's well secured and well defined. Um, yeah. So Sarah, when you were talking about we can't prevent someone from swerving or tailgating or whatever, reminded me of we had a campaign in the U.S. for many years. We still do, with Smokey the Bear for preventing forest fires, and it was the tagline was "Only you can prevent forest fires," and it's true here too, right? It's the responsibility of the developer to prevent, yeah, bad things happening with their app in terms of security.
Very, very true. Or is, test things, make sure things are encrypted, make sure,
Yeah,
particularly if you're dealing, I feel like in the world of of digital marketing, we just have so much PII data as well. Like all those
yeah.
needs to be properly encrypted, properly
Yep.
secured. Yeah. It's on
By
your
the
risk. It's
way,
only you can ensure the application is secure.
Right, exactly. We'll have to get t-shirts made up. I like that.
thinking about Ron's question, what's the most typical questions that we get very often, and what you said, Sarah, about encryption? A very simple tip that we have in the docs as well, that is regularly asked, is how do I store in the best manner, in most secure manner, my third-party secrets, like you're having an API key to interact with your, I don't know, with your other products that are not Adobe products, and or credentials, passwords, and so on. And there is a very simple way to do that. It's what we do ourselves for our own services. By default, when you're having a runtime action, you can set default parameters, define them in the manifest YAML. And if you define default parameters for this action, these parameters will be encrypted. They are encrypted before getting stored in the DB that we have behind the scenes to store the actions and their metadata. And they are only decrypted when the action is getting invoked. So the whole process is very safe, and this is the way to go, the easiest way to go if you want to store custom secrets within your app.
Right on. That's great advice. Thank you very much.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. I don't know how to put my head.
Yeah.
I have the feeling I'm.
Yes, exactly. Well,
We're all just
and
bobbing left and
yeah,
right.
and Meryl, when you're like closer like that, we kind of look like you know, like the bars of a cell phone that are, increasing in in height.
Like network
There we
quality.
go. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
I was thinking about the Daltons for the ones who know Lucky Luke. Same thing.
Yes. Hopefully, this has been informative and entertaining. This is kind of what we're going for here. But anyways, yeah. So do we have anything else to chat about, or should we close this out? And also just to mention, I don't know, Sarah, if you had, did you have the Experience Cloud link up on that slide? I don't remember the what's next one. There was the join Firefly, and then, anyways, Experience
The
League.
resources link? Yeah.
Yeah, Experience League is where we go to. Oh yeah, you had the documentation one, which is fine. So yeah, so Experience League. If you've got any questions, anything comes up, you want to know more about, you have a specific question about security, definitely reach out to us. We had actually a partner the other day reach out with some pretty specific questions about security on what they were looking for. So we are happy to help out. There you go. So if there is nothing left, definitely join us next time in 2 weeks, where we talk about Live-Wired Sneak, and you can learn all about building React Spectrum UI front-end code without actually writing code. Pretty amazing. There you go. Thank you, Sarah, for that awesome presentation, and Meryl for being here and providing awesome answers to all kinds of stuff.
Making sure the product manager doesn't say anything silly, right?
Yes, exactly. Keeping us all in check.
Meryl's my guardrail, to ensure the doors are locked.
Totally.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Have a great day. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.